here's the last thing that we learn for us, ourselves, from a passage like chapter 4. It almost seems to be a principle that when you're doing something good for God, you'll get attacked somehow. Jesus Christ is baptized with the Spirit. You know, the dove comes down. This is my son whom I'm well pleased. High point. Next thing you know, he's in the wilderness being tempted by the devil. That's the Christian life. That is the Christian life. You see it over and over again. It happens constantly. One thing after another. I mean, you know, Jesus is baptized. Elijah's great triumph, you know, over the prophets on Mount Mount Carmel, the prophets of Baal. And after that, he gets incredibly depressed. You know, over and over again, you see sometimes when you're doing the great thing, you get the most opposition. Why? First of all, if you identify with Jesus Christ, you're going to be persecuted. Here is the beatitude we all hate. Can I just read it to you? This is the beatitude we all hate. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven, for in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. And of course, 2 Timothy 3:12. All who live godly in Christ Jesus will suffer persecution. All. You're going to get this kind of mockery, disdain, you know, mockery and disdain. Hear us, O God, for we are despised. One of the things that has not changed a bit, is that we are despised. And we're despised for the sake of the Lord. Now, two things to say before going to the medicine chest for this. It's interesting to notice that the other founders of the great religions did not die in shame. Buddha, Muhammad, Confucius, from what we know, these guys triumphed. They had a lot of problems, but they died old, full of years, surrounded by admirers. In many ways, they triumphed. Jesus Christ died young, cut off, died in shame. Why? I think because, at the human level, his claims were so much greater. You know, Anne Rice, who wrote the vampire novels and all that sort of thing, I know she's had a very strange trajectory spiritually, but some years ago, she was trying to write a novel about Christianity, and like most novelists, she was trying to study her subject, and she started reading New Testament scholarship, and she was astounded by the fact that so many of the people in the world of history and New Testament scholarship actually seemed to dislike the person they were studying. This is what she said. She says, I discovered that so many of the scholars, and the scholars, it was their career to study the historical background of Jesus. I discovered so many of these scholars who had devoted their entire life to New Testament scholarship disliked Jesus Christ. Some pitied him as a helpless failure, others sneered at him, some showed outright contempt. I had never come across this in any other field of research. People who go into Elizabethan studies are not out to prove that Queen Elizabeth was a fool. They don't make snickering remarks about her or spend their entire careers trying to pick apart her historical reputation. Yes, of course, occasionally a scholar might study a villain, but even then they usually argue for the importance of his or her place in history. But in general, scholars do not spend their entire lives in the company of a historical figure that they openly despise, and yet these New Testament scholars detested and despised Jesus Christ. The point is, if you identify with Jesus Christ, you will get despised. Hear us, O our God, for we are despised. What should we do when that happens? And we're certainly, in the Western societies, in for a lot more of being despised than we've ever been in a long time. Here's the answer. Don't do this. Hear us, O God, for we are despised. Do not cover up their guilt or blot out their sins from your sight, for they have thrown insults in the face of the builders. Derek Kidner, who wrote a commentary on Ezra and Nehemiah and has also written a wonderful commentary on Psalms, talks about the imprecatory Psalms, the Psalms where in the Old Testament they say, Lord, blot them out, don't forgive them, don't cover their guilt. He says there's a couple things you got to keep in mind. I remember there's a place, in the Old Testament, I guess it's Psalm 137, where The psalmist says, "O Lord, do to the Babylonians what they did to us. Blessed is he who dashes the heads of your little infants on the rocks." So that's what the Babylonians used to do. That's what they did in those days. When you were sacking a city, you would pick up the infants of the people that you're invading the city. You pick up their infants, you grab them by the feet, and then you dash their brains out on a rock. Oh Lord, let that happen to them. And Derek Kidner says, think of three things. Number one, these are cries against injustice. They are crying against injustice. Christians today should still cry against injustice. Tell God about injustice. Ask God to do something. He's a God of justice. Just don't give in. Don't say, well, that's just life. Secondly, notice that even in the Old Testament, almost always, the prayers are not taking vengeance themselves. They're saying, Lord, you take it. So even there, they're on to the truth. But here's what he says, this side of the cross, no, Christians don't pray like that. That's what Derek Kidner said. I think he's right. Why? Because we know this, that God's little one had his head dashed. He was stricken. He was crucified, and he was despised so that we could have a name that will never die. Your reputation, your name, you can't really be despised, not in the long run, because our names are written in heaven. So our reputation is secure. Why? Because he was despised. He made himself of no reputation. He emptied himself of all of his glory. He got all that persecution now. When that happens to you, we're despised. Say, Lord, I look to you for my vindication, which is actually what Nehemiah did. We look to you for our vindication. But we have resources to forgive our enemies and to love our enemies that Nehemiah didn't have, that we've got to pick up and take. There's a sense in which I think Jesus is saying something like this. Look, if you take a little hit to your reputation, if you get persecuted a little bit, knowing what I did for you, you can take it. I got the ultimate shame. I was rejected either by my father. I got the shame you deserved. I got the rejection you deserved. So that now you can know you have a name written in heaven. You're a citizen of the ultimate city. You're surrounded by the ultimate walls of salvation. You can't lose that because you're mine. You can handle. Speak up for me. Do my work. And if you get despised, those who look to me will never be put to shame.